Hi there. I have a favorite author when it comes to notary related books. His name is Michael Closen, Closcen. I'll show you his information on the screen in just a little bit. But in his book, Notary Best Practices, he writes, identifying the signer is one of the most important steps in the notarization process. I'm not quoting him, but that's what he says in his book. And you know what? I have to agree with him. I think it's I think it's the most important because whether you're doing a traditional notarization or a remote notarization, which is what we'll be talking about in this video, fixing a mistake in identifying the signer is way harder, far more difficult than correcting the spelling of a signer's name on the notary certificate or writing in your commission expiration date because you forgot to do it the first time. Or those of you who are signing agents, getting back to your home office only to realize the signer forgot to write their initials on 2 pages. Nearly every other type of mistake can be corrected. Incorrectly identifying the signer, accepting fraudulent ID, that's a bigger issue, much more difficult to correct, especially when performing a remote notarization. The signer may be in another state, another county, another state, or another country. Way harder. My name's Michelle Riley. I'm a commissioned notary here in the state of Alabama. And in this video, we're going to focus on how to properly identify remote signers. This may end up being a 2-part video because, as you may or may not know, the requirements for identifying a remote signer are very different than what we do to identify a traditional in-person signer. And so we're going to talk about personal knowledge as a way to ID a person for remote notarization. We're going to talk about the forms of government issue ID that can be presented. And by the way, it's not just one ID card. The remote signer needs to produce 2 forms of government issue ID. And believe it or not, the personal knowledge, the multiple ID cards, in the grand scheme of things, that's easy. The hard part comes when the notary is required to review public and private data sources and then compare that with the ID or use that information to further identify the signer. That's why we may need 2 videos to do all this. I want to thank you for sticking with me as we go slowly through the entire remote ink notarization process for Alabama Notaries. So keep in mind, this is very unique, even uh, different from the other states that offer remote ink notarization. Alabama's not the only one. There's about 3, 4, or 5 other states. So let's go ahead. I think it would be helpful for me to share my screen so you can follow along. All right, let's take a closer look at this. Again, the Alabama Code is letting us know that as Alabama notaries performing a remote notarization, we can use personal knowledge of the signer's identity, or we can require the signer to show us 2 valid forms of government issue identification. And one of those cards must have the signer's picture, their face, and their sample signature or their full legal signature. So if it's personal knowledge, that's all you need. If you personally know the signer, you can stop there and proceed with the notarization. But if you don't, the signer must show you, the notary, 2 forms of government issue ID. And then you need to verify the signer's identity by reviewing both public or private data sources or records. With personal knowledge, what I like about this is that they are not stipulating that you must know the person for a set period of time. I've known one of my neighbors for over 10, 12 years, but we don't interact a lot. And so I would definitely require those neighbors, it's a couple, to show me ID in order to notarize their signature. I cannot state that I personally know them. And turning to the experts in the field of notary, Michael Closen, who I mentioned earlier, he writes, even parties with whom one has dealt with for years may not be whom they claim to be. I think this is even more important today than 10, 20 years ago, with the internet connecting us to people all around the globe. And it would be very easy for someone to give a alias or pseudonym as a name, and we wouldn't be able to verify it. Regarding personal knowledge, another expert in the field, Peter Van Alstyne, he wrote, personal knowledge is derived from an acquaintance and interaction with the person over a period of time and is sufficient to eliminate all reasonable doubt as to the person's true identity. But then he adds, it cannot be based on the word of other persons. So again, going back to my neighbors, let's say I worked with the wife. And so for her, I may, if I've worked with her 5 days a week in the same office, interacting with her, and I'm confident she is who she says she is, I could notarize her signature based on personal knowledge. But when she comes to me and says, Michelle, will you please notarize my spouse's signature. And by the way, Michelle, I can vouch for him being who he says he is. The answer is going to be a firm no for me. I need to see that government issue ID for the spouse. So again, personal knowledge, you're good to go. Just make sure you personally know the signer. So for most remote notarizations, you will be asking for government issue ID. If you were doing a traditional notarization, you would only need to ask for one form of government issue ID that has the signer's picture and signature. But for remote notarizations, Alabama wants us to ask for two. So the first form of ID must have the photograph of the signer and the signature of the signer. What you see on the screen as examples is not a comprehensive list. It is only four of many other types of government issue ID that you could use. These are the most common, the most readily available: passport, driver's license, non-driver state ID card, and a permanent resident card, also known as a green card. Keep in mind that passport does not have to be from the United States. It can be from another country. Same thing with the driver's license. It does not have to be an Alabama driver's license. The license can be from Texas, New York, Colorado. I guess technically it could even be from another country. The non-driver state ID card, same rules apply. And then the permanent resident card, I do want to call out that some permanent resident cards will include a signature, not all. So I don't want you to assume if you get one without the signature that it's fraudulent. Under certain situations, the individual is required to sign their name, and in other situations, they are not. So that's the first form of ID. The second form of ID does not require a photograph or signature. Now, if it does have it, great. But the good news here, this is giving the notary a little more flexibility in the signer. Again, the 2, 4, 6 types of ID you see under the second ID column is not all inclusive. There could be other types out there that you can consider. The two items on the list that I'm not that familiar with, well, really three. I don't think I have seen a tribal identification card yet. And so if I was presented with that, I would probably spend some time on Google and go to a reputable site in order to compare what the signer is producing or has handed to me or shown me, because this is remote, with what is on Google. And again, I wouldn't just go to any internet site. It would need to be one that I've vetted previously before meeting with the signer online. And then those last two bullets. This is something that I forget to mention to the signer, that if they attend an Alabama university or college, or if they're employees of a Alabama university or college, I can use their student ID or their employee ID. And then individuals who are employed by the U.S. federal government, Alabama state government, or any government municipalities and entities, I can ask for their employment ID or employee ID. So there's just some really good options because I do find it hard to obtain two forms of ID for everyone. If you were to ask me of all of the requests for remote notarizations that I have to decline, what's the reason for it? I would have to say this would be the reason. Most signers or individuals have no problem offering a driver's license. But to come up with two forms of government issue ID, it does seem to pose a problem for quite a few people. You might be wondering how you can decide whether an identification card is valid or not. There are options. I mentioned a moment ago about Googling, and Googling is fine. I like to rely on something more, and that is even for traditional notarizations. I keep two books in my notary bag, and I'll show them to you in a moment when I minimize the screen. That allows me to compare the ID card being shown to me through the camera when I'm online with the signer with what's in these ID checking guide books. I'll show them to you in a moment. There are also some individuals who may interpret valid to mean unexpired. I think those are two very different terms and words. I have not seen in the code where it says the ID cannot be expired. I definitely prefer that the signer presents ID that is current, but sometimes that's not an option, especially for individuals who are living abroad, working abroad. They may not make it back to the States to update their driver's license right on time. And since the word expired and current are not used in the code, I like to, again, exercise some judgment. And what I mean by that is what is most important to me is that the signer's physical appearance matches the photograph on the ID card, and the signer's signature on the ID card matches the signature that they're going to make on the document. And that the ID card itself appears to be valid versus fraudulent. And again, that's when I go to my ID checking guidebooks. Another reason why I use flexibility or judgment with regards to expiration date is a few years back, I was honored to have as a guest the then Alabama Secretary of State, John Merrill, attend one of my notary meetings. in Birmingham, Alabama. And one of the notaries who attended asked the Secretary of State what he thought about accepting expired IDs for traditional notarizations. And Mr. Merrill, I felt, made a very profound point that I had never considered. He said, we notaries should remember that an Alabama driver's license is the real purpose of it isn't so that a notary can ID a signer. It's not issued for ID purposes. The real purpose behind a driver's license is to demonstrate someone has been authorized to operate a vehicle on Alabama's roads. And just because the driver doesn't renew the license by July 30th doesn't mean they stop being that individual on July 30th. They're the same person. They're just late renewing their driver's license, and they shouldn't be operating their vehicle illegally. So that's the second reason why I'm open to accepting expired ID, as long as there aren't any other red flags or yellow flags or reasons for me to be concerned. The third and final reason why I give grace in this area to the signer is that the state of Alabama allows voters with expired IDs to vote. I believe the cutoff point is 60 days past the expiration date. And if you're a voter and you follow the news, you know how important and how stringent Alabama's voting laws are. If they're willing to give grace for someone casting their vote, again, I'm comfortable giving some grace as well. Remember, in looking at these IDs, even though it's through the screen, through technology, they're going to end up holding it up to the camera, front and back. I ask them to take a picture of their IDs, front and back, and send them to me so that I have a color visual copy of their IDs in order to compare with the ID checking guide. That is what I'm doing. You may want to give less grace than that. And if so, that's totally up to you. But again, for me, valid means, is this truly a US passport? Or did someone hand you ID that said, citizen of the sovereign nation of States United? That's not a valid form of government issue ID. Okay. I hope that helps. Let's go ahead and take a look at the ID checking guide books. I think you'll like this. So whenever I renew my notary commission, I also order new stamps, embossers, the whole kit and caboodle. And the other thing I order is a new ID checking guide book And I believe the name of the company is Driver's License Guide Company. What I like about it is if someone from Vermont showed me their driver's license for remote notarization, this lets me know what it should look like. It also provides me with information about what the driver's license for a minor would look like, state ID. It talks about the security features front and back. So I don't have to Google, I don't have to guess. I pull out this book, and this covers all of the United States, and Canada. The second book that I invest in, because I do a lot of traditional in-person notarizations where one ID is required. And these are people that I do not know. It's rare that I use personally known, as I mentioned. And so I never know who I'm going to meet with. As a result, I'm often presented with passports and licenses from other countries. So this is the international version. So if someone from France showed me their identity card, and someone from Gambia, and I'm pretty sure this includes passports. Maybe not. Identity cards, driver's license. Good, good. Mexico. So yes, I'm not seeing passports, so that is one that I would have to Google. So those two books, I will link in the description, or I'll pin it in comments where I purchase these from. I know that you can also purchase one or both on the National Notary Association's website. Their shipping and postage is more expensive than going to the actual site. I don't know if I should say it's more expensive. I didn't need mine in a hurry. I didn't need my books overnighted or rushed to me. And so the actual ID checking guide website um, gives the option for sending it through snail mail. So I took that option. I really want to encourage you, if you are performing not only remote notarizations, but even traditional notarizations for the general public, to invest in either these ID checking guides or something else, so that should someone pass you a fraudulent ID, you can at least demonstrate to the courts or to the authorities that you used reasonable care in checking their ID. I'll go ahead. I don't like talking about this. It makes me sad whenever I do. But at one point, I did have a brick and mortar office for my notary business, and a couple from Maryland came to my office, And I have family in Maryland. And so we got to talking about the traffic in the DMV and just gabbing. They're very friendly. And I don't remember the type of document that they asked me to notarize. And so I'm sitting at my desk and I'm journaling, looking at the ID, laughing, talking, completed the notarization. They went on their way. And it wasn't until I was closing the office for the evening, I was playing back the events of the day in my head. And during that playback, I recalled that while we were gabbing, hint, hint, the ID, the front part looked like a Maryland driver's license or state ID. I'm not sure. But I did turn it over. That is the step that I normally take. And the back was blank. But because I was distracted, it didn't register. I was distracted. I was enjoying the conversation. And I made a major error. Okay. So I don't want to underestimate how important it is for you to make sure you have the necessary resources to help you to check ID. And as I mentioned earlier, when you are in that remote notarization, all right, the signer is on the screen, the way that I'm on the screen now. The notary must have the signer hold up the ID close enough close enough to the camera so that the information is legible, front and back. Okay, front and back. Very important. Remember, if the person is trying to pass off fraudulent ID, there is not going to be an opportunity for you to do a do-over or to reverse it. Now, if the signer is legitimate and there was just some type of mistake made, then I'm sure they will cooperate and give you an opportunity to repeat the notarization. But that is going to take extra time, and that could cause a financial hardship on the part of the signer, and then you're looking at possible liability concerns. I'm going to pause here. We aren't done. We only took care of personal knowledge and 2 forms of valid government issue ID. In the next video, we're going to really focus on what it means for the notary to verify the signer's identity using public and data sources. I appreciate you joining. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I don't want you to miss any videos. And when you subscribe, it makes it easier for other Alabama notaries to find the videos. Thank you. I'll see you again soon, I hope.